Every time I wear this shirt, there's literally a makeup stain on it and it's really annoying. Happy Vlogmas day 11. For today's video, I am probably going to hurt a lot of people's feelings. For that, I apologize in advance. Today's video is all about the worst books that I've read this year. And to be fair, I've read over 100 books and I think I only have 10 or 12 books in this pile. Maybe a little bit more if you count 2 book series that I included on this list. For the most part, I've enjoyed the majority of the books that I've read this year. There's just been a couple that I haven't enjoyed as much. So I thought it would be really fun to share the worst books that I've read this year with you guys since the year is coming to an end and pretty soon we are going to be starting fresh for 2023. A quick little disclaimer, if your favorite book happens to be on this list, I am sorry. Just because I don't like a book doesn't mean you can't like the book. We can have different opinions and respect each other's opinions. So take this video with a grain of salt. With that being said, we are just going to dive right in. I'm excited. I ended up switching shirts because that stain was really pissing me off. I literally just put on another black sweatshirt, so nothing exciting, but that stain was going to bug me this entire video. Also, you might hear my husband in the shower in the background. There's a lot going on right now today. I'm actually filming this quite late and it still has to go up today, so I'm like all over the place. But we're going to get this done. The first book that is on my worst books of 22 list is Look What You Made Me Do by Elaine Murphy. This one is basically about 2 sisters. One is a serial killer and the other one helps her serial killer sister hide the bodies. She doesn't want to help her sister, but she's being blackmailed and feels like there's no other option but to help her sister continue to hide her victims. A second serial killer happens to be in the same area and notices and figures out what the sisters are doing and decides to target them. It sounds really interesting, doesn't it? But the delivery was not interesting at all. This book fell so flat for me. It was so boring. I love reading about serial killers. I love true crime. This isn't true crime or anything, but it is about a serial killer, 2 serial killers at that. I was expecting a lot more action, a lot more thrill since it is a thriller, and it really was just a letdown. Once I got to the big reveal of who the second serial killer was, it was so anticlimactic. The big reveal only lasted maybe a chapter. So once I read the big twist, I was just like, really? Is that all we're doing? Is that it? And yeah, that literally was it. Only 1 chapter dedicated to the big reveal of who the serial killer was, and then the second serial killer kind of goes away, fades away into the background. It was honestly just a giant waste of time for me. I am so sorry, Elaine Murphy. I just did not like this book at all. I do have 2 book series that I want to talk about in this video. The first one being the Selection series. So this year I read all 3 books of the Selection series. I actually think there's more books in this series, but I stopped at the first 3. Think about the Bachelor meets royalty. So it's basically a competition of girls. I think it's like 14 girls. I don't really remember how many girls. They're all competing for the love of Prince Maxon and to obviously marry him, become the princess, eventually the queen of this country. It is a dystopian romance book. I personally think that I would have enjoyed this series a lot more had I read it when I was younger, had I read it when I was maybe in middle school or high school, but I read it when I was 27 years old earlier this year, and I just found the main character to be extremely annoying, extremely self-absorbed. She really was the definition of I'm not like the other girls, and I just did not like her at all. I loved Prince Maxon. I wish I could have gotten a book from his point of view, and I probably would have continued the series or enjoyed the series a lot more, but this series just did not do it for me. The writing is super addicting, I will say that. I read these books back to back, but by the time I was done, I was like, okay, I don't think I really enjoyed this series all that much. Again, I think if you're much younger than me or you really love YA, maybe you're going to disagree with me and say that you absolutely love this series. But since I'm a little bit older, this series was definitely not it for me. The second series I want to talk about is the Folk of Air series by Holly Black. This series was so aggravating on so many levels. It is a young adult fantasy trilogy. It follows Jude, who is a mortal girl who is trying to win a place in the High Court of Fairy. She's lived on these lands for the past decade, ever since her parents were murdered by a fairy, and she's always struggled because obviously she's immortal and she's always wanted more power. The Fae, I think that's what they're called, the Fae really looked down on her because she obviously is a human and she has no power. She's not really one of them, so she's always struggled to prove that she is capable of holding power and that she deserves to be a part of their country, their land. The main problem that I had with this series was the main character, Jude. I felt like she was so self-absorbed. She was obsessed with obtaining power to the point where she didn't really care about who she hurt until the very last minute. She just wanted power and she just wanted respect, which I understand why, especially when you learn more about her backstory, but I just didn't really like her dialogue. As I was reading her dialogue, I kept rolling my eyes. I was like, this girl cannot be serious. Also, so many people have been telling me that they love Prince Carden. I think that's his name, Prince Carden, and he low-key was very abusive mentally and physically in the first book, and you get to understand why when you read the second and third book. But at the same time, a history of trauma, a history of abuse doesn't give you the right to abuse someone else. So while everyone is obsessed with Prince Carden, I'm over here looking at him sideways because of his behavior in the first book. And yes, you can argue that he redeemed himself, but I'm not going to stand someone who was abusive. And Prince Carden definitely was abusive in this first book towards Jude, and he's supposed to be her love interest. I just couldn't see past that. This series definitely didn't do it for me. Sorry, guys. The next book that made the list for worst books of 2022 is actually a recent read for me, and that is Something from Tiffany's by Melissa Hill. Now, if you watched my last reading vlog that went up yesterday, in fact, then you probably already know why I hated this book so much. This one basically follows two couples, so it follows Ethan and Vanessa, and then it also follows Gary and Rachel. Gary and Ethan are at Tiffany's in New York City at the same time. Something happens that causes their purchases to get mixed up. So Gary has Ethan's purchase, which is a lot more valuable than Gary's purchase, and Ethan has Gary's purchase. So the entire book is Ethan trying to get his very expensive purchase back from Gary and Rachel, but things keep happening that prevent him from getting his purchase back. The plot really intrigues me because it takes place in New York City. Well, it doesn't really. Only the first couple chapters take place in New York City. The rest takes place in Dublin and London, if I remember correctly. And I thought it was going to be a cute little Christmas romance, but it turned out to be just a really dull book. The plot dragged on so much. It's over 300 pages, and this book probably could have been a novella. It could have probably been 150 pages or even less. The main characters were so boring. I didn't connect with them at all. The main character, Ethan, just kept making mistakes after mistakes instead of just being upfront about what he was trying to get back and speaking up, but he refused to speak up until like the very last couple chapters. So way too slow for my liking. Characters were very dull and the plot was very boring. I just expected a lot more from this book. I did watch the movie on Amazon Prime, and let me tell you, I enjoyed the movie 10 times more than the book. So I would recommend for you guys to check out the movie if you're into cute little Christmassy types of movies, but just skip out on the book. Then we have a very controversial book that is probably going to hurt a lot of feelings, and that is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This book made me physically angry. I don't get angry very often, especially while reading books, but this book literally made me want to throw it across the room. It follows two friends who have an on and off relationship throughout their young adult years, and the two main characters are just so infuriating. All of the problems would have been solved had they just communicated and had been upfront about their feelings. Instead, they chose to try to hide their feelings or ignore their feelings altogether. And I literally DNF'd this book halfway during a 24-hour reading vlog because I was just so angry at the characters. And I know that a lot of people will argue that this shows a realistic relationship. And I'm like, does it really? Because if you're in a relationship, you should be able to communicate with your partner. If you're best friends with someone, you should be able to communicate with them without fearing what that person is going to say. And I just really hate the miscommunication trope. I know that a lot of people love this book, but I just did not love it. It made me angry. I would never recommend this book. I kind of want to give it away because I don't even want to own it. That's how much I hate it. The next book on my list is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I had such high hopes for this book, you guys. If you don't know, this is a spin-off to the Love Hypothesis. It actually follows two completely different characters from the first book. And if you don't know, the Love Hypothesis is one of my all-time favorite reads. I actually read it this year and absolutely loved it. This one felt like a cheap replica of the Love Hypothesis. Like, it was trying so hard to be the Love Hypothesis, but it just failed completely. And I struggled to get through this book, you guys. I truly did. I wanted to DNF it, but I didn't. I pulled through. I did love Levi, the male main character, but the female main character, B, was just not it for me. I found her dialogue to be really annoying. She was also another self-absorbed character. This just wasn't it for me. That's all I have on this, because honestly, I don't even remember exactly what happened in this book. That's how easily forgettable it was for me. Next up, we have The Goal by Elle Kennedy. This is the fourth book in the Off-Campus series. It actually follows Sabrina and Tucker, and this book was another dull read for me. I feel like that is the common theme of all these books, that I just found them incredibly dull and incredibly pointless. Don't get me wrong, the first book of the Off-Campus series, The Deal, is by far my favorite book in the entire Off-Campus series. I absolutely fell in love with that book, but this one just fell so flat for me. I was not interested in the pregnancy trope at all. I was not interested in Sabrina and Tucker as a couple. And since you already know going into the book that Sabrina is going to end up pregnant, it's literally on the back cover of the book in the synopsis, there really is no big reveal. There really is no twist in this book, and it was just pretty boring. And I actually think I DNF'd it. I don't think I actually finished it all the way, and if I did, I don't remember what the ending was. Yeah, not my favorite book in the Off-Campus series by any means. This next book is also a very beloved book here on BookTube. A lot of booktubers love this book, and I just don't understand why. Actually, I do understand why. The book is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is childhood friends to lovers, second chance at romance. It follows two main characters, Macy and Elliot, I believe were their names. Honestly, I can't tell you much about this book because this is another book that I read and immediately forgot about its existence, if I'm being honest. My main problem with this book is that, once again, I need a new adjective. It just felt dull. I read this book after reading The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, and I absolutely love that book. I think I actually gave it 5 stars, and this one is completely different from that book. Like, The Unhoneymooners is a romantic comedy. This one is not. It's a little bit more serious. It deals with loss and grief and trust issues, which normally I wouldn't mind reading a book with all of those things, but this one just really didn't do it for me. I didn't really like the main character Macy, and especially after reading the big twist, the big reveal, and finding out why Macy stopped talking to Elliot after all those years, I was just like, really? That's it? That's the reason why you stopped talking to him? That's the reason why you didn't even give him a chance to explain his side of the story? So that kind of ruined the whole book for me, if I'm being honest. And honestly, I feel like no one talks about the fact that Elliot was 100% taken advantage of at one point in this book. If you read this book, then you probably know what I'm talking about. And I feel like no one talks about that. I think if you're fans of Friends to Lovers, then you'll probably adore this book, but since I'm not a fan of Friends to Lovers and I came to the conclusion of that fact after I read this book, I didn't really enjoy it. But again, if you're a Friends to Lovers trope fan and you never get tired of that trope, then you'll probably disagree with me and you'll probably absolutely adore this book, but it just wasn't for me. Honestly, that's the thing with these types of videos. Like, some of these books fell flat for me because of the tropes that were incorporated into into the book. And since I wasn't necessarily a fan of those tropes, the chances were pretty high that I wasn't going to like those books. But to be honest, I didn't really know I wasn't a fan of those tropes until I read these books and read similar books to the ones mentioned in this video, that I realized like, okay, maybe it's not the author, maybe it's not the writing, it's just me. Like, I don't like those tropes, so I need to stop buying books with those tropes. And I have, like, I haven't bought any Friends to Lovers books since reading Love in Other Words and People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I think that was the last book I bought that had the Friends to Lovers trope, because I'm just not a fan of that trope at all. Can't stand it. I don't want to read any books with that trope ever again in my life, and that's how I feel about that. To each their own. Then we have Priest. This is about a priest who breaks his vow of celibacy inside a church. Not once, but multiple times. And throughout the book, you see him struggle, but not really, because he continues to break his vow of celibacy. He feels guilty after the fact, of course, but he keeps doing it. The struggle is kind of non-existent, if I'm being honest. And I am a religious person, like, I do believe in God, but I'm not easily offended. So this book really didn't offend me at all. The only thing I did not like about this book was that it focused a lot on the spice and not so much on the story. And that's probably my fault. I didn't really know this was erotica, which I think it's erotic literature. I didn't know it was that. Had I known, I probably wouldn't have purchased it, because that's not my favorite genre. I don't mind a little bit of spice, but if the spice overwhelms the plot, then I have a problem with it. And that's the main reason why I didn't like this book. It was just too much spice and not enough love story for my liking. Also, the spice was super cringy, in my opinion, and every time I was reading the spice and just reading the main character's dialogue with the female character, I was just like, what is going on here? I personally did not enjoy it, but again, if you like spice, then you might disagree with me and you might love this book. I do think that the cover is really pretty though. The final book on this list is Neon Gods by Katie Robert. This is actually a Greek retelling of Persephone's and Hades, I hope I'm pronouncing their names correctly, love story. It actually takes place in the modern times, in modern society. I think there's even social media apps in this book, if I remember correctly. And the main reason I didn't really like this book was because, again, similar to the Priest book, it was just a lot of spice and not enough love story for my liking. I pick up a romance novel because of the love story, not so much because of the spice. The spice is just a bonus, I guess, if you will. And on the back, it does say that the genre is romance, but I do think it's more erotic literature than anything else because of how spicy it is. And I also felt like it was trying so hard to be 50 Shades of Grey when it isn't. So that's another thing that threw me off the book. It just has so many references to 50 Shades of Grey or things that happen in the 50 Shades of Grey series that I was just like, what is going on here? And I think there's a series. This is the first book in the series, and I'm stopping at this book because I just don't like it. But again, if you really enjoy spicy romance books, and this is the book for you, like, you're going to love it. But if you're like me and you read more books for the romance element, not so much for the spice, then skip out on this one. One of you guys called me out yesterday because I didn't do chocolate of the day. I completely forgot. Funny enough, I ate the chocolate in the video, but I forgot to talk about it and show me getting it from the advent calendar. So today I am making sure to remember, and it is chocolate of the day time. So today is day 11 of Vlogmas. I think I actually had this one before. This is a chocolate of the day. Actually, maybe I didn't have this. I think this is almond raindrop. It's definitely almond raindrop. I do have to say it's not my favorite, but it's not bad. I think I give it like a 3 out of 10. But yeah, chocolate of the day, you guys. I remembered. Let me know in the comments below, what is one book that you read this year that you absolutely hate? I would love to know. And I really hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I hope you guys are enjoying Vlogmas. If you are, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to watch more Vlogmas videos from me. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.